It's really simple. Anyone.
Yes. Hello, I'm Thomas Pike. I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for High Wycombe. The public school dominates our political system, the top jobs in our economy, and, as we've been reminded by the noble Lloyd Moynihan, our top sporting teams. In these very troubling economic times, with rising poverty and declining social mobility, how can we ensure that children from disadvantaged backgrounds may still access high-quality education and the best jobs our economy has to offer?
Thank you very much. See if we have an applause for the answers. I'm going to bring in Sean first on this one.
I think when you're talking about school, that then comes down to our wider school system, the school that most people go to. Is about quality and what we do about that. I think sometimes we measure the wrong things. I think we need to look at the exams that are taken and how we push academic rigour. I was not the best in school. I had to catch up in university, but the point was I had the opportunity. And what I think is very important is FE colleges. I think for a lot of people who don't succeed at school, FE college is often the way back. As for top jobs, it's quite hard to legislate for that. You can't force a company to take particular people. But what you can do, and this spreads into the sort of the youth angle as well, is show why people are of added value when they come from a different background. I was at a thing recently with Goldman Sachs, and they were actively searching out people who didn't come the ordinary route, because the guy's view was, if I wanted someone who thinks like me, I can just ask me. And he wanted other people who'd come to life a different way. I have a mentor who runs a very large hedge fund, and he said to me, he measures people by the journey they've travelled, the distance they've travelled. And he basically said, if you have the same qualifications as someone else, but you started further down the line, as it were, he'd employ you ahead. But that's the kind of thing we need to get out into society as a whole, so employers broadly feel like the journey that someone's been on is of use to their business.
I wish I had a mentor hedge fund. I'm just going to ask Rosina to come in on that next.
Just kind of on the point, we have to be really careful not to judge people on their educational background. I feel that we're all still learning, even past school. I think what matters is if we marry the schooling and life experience together. But on that point, we need to really ensure access to higher education. And also, I know that the fact that tuition fees, as you know, have gone up, I feel as if we need to make sure that, particularly around tuition fees, that we still encourage people to go to education. As we can see from the figures, the latest figures, there's a fear of debt that seems to be coming from, there's a fear of debt of people actually going to university. So we still need to encourage them, even so.
And I'm going to bring Nick in now, so if an answer question is asked you where you went to school, but I'm going to...
No, I'm going to have to fess up, because I'm going to ask you to take Rosina's advice and don't judge people by where they went to school. I'm an old Etonian, and I'm the fourth successive generation of my family to be an MP, so I'm part of the problem. You're entirely right. It's a really, really good question, and I could talk for hours about what do we try and improve schools, or open access to university, or apprenticeships, and all the sort of traditional stuff. But actually what I'd like to talk about very briefly is about something that came up before, which is about self-esteem and confidence. Because a lot of this is about aspiration, parents' aspirations and children's aspirations. And I'm a big believer in mentoring schemes. I'm a big believer in each of our ability to help a young person on that journey. I've done a bit in my constituency and got a huge amount of that. I don't know if they did, but got a huge amount of that. And so what I'm trying to do about it is, through my ministerial brief, I'm a big believer in encouraging social action. And there's some really interesting charities and programs that are all about trying to work with young people with talent, with ambition, with aspiration, to help them through some quite important transition points in life, you know, primary to secondary school and beyond. So something like, there's a new program, for example, called Future First. I came through the public school system. Most public schools have a big network of alumni of those schools that are kind of there and accessible. Through the state system, that doesn't really exist. This organisation called Future First is trying to build that by encouraging people to go back to their schools and offer their support as mentors. There's a programme called Into University, which again I backed with taxpayers' money, that is all about trying to mentor young people who could go to university, have got that talent, got that brain power, but perhaps don't have that confidence that it's for them. So there's lots of initiatives out there, sort of civil society initiatives, are opportunities to help people on this journey, which is separate and complementary to everything the government's got to do to improve the schools, widen access to university, develop technical qualifications that can actually count for something. All that is important, but there's stuff that each of us can do as well.
Jermaine.
Yes, I think coming back to something Sean said about being hard to legislate for, as you say, some of the more top jobs available to people from disadvantaged background. I can only speak for myself, having come from a council housing estate myself, and what you class as a low-income background. I found that it's important to almost re-educate those people coming from the demographic that you spoke about, to enable them to take their opportunities, take what opportunities that do exist. I mean, there may not be as many as some people would like, but they still exist, and I think it's important to almost encourage the ones that do want to sort of push a little further. Like myself, I was able to find that mentorship throughout my school years, throughout my further education into university. I was able to align myself with opportunities that I observed could actually take me to that next step further. So I think it's it's not about a blame culture, as they say. I think it's important for individuals to find out how they themselves can move forward, basically.
I'm going to bring in Tim, and I'm going to ask a specific extra rider, which is about, as I suspect there may be one or two budding politicians in the audience, which is about how you get into politics in particular from non-traditional backgrounds. It's very expensive business these days, becoming an MP department.
It can be, yeah. Well, let me fess up. I went to a state primary school in a very deprived part of my town, and I went to a bog standard comprehensive. But so what? Just as Nick said, I hope we both got into politics and into our jobs beforehand on merit. We need people to do it on merit, not through privilege and advantage. And I'm also a bit of an anorak when it comes to politics, because this is my 36th party conference I've been to consecutively. I was my first one at the tender age of 14, having joined the Young Conservatives in those days, just after Mr Thatcher had become leader of the Conservative Party. And I went to the conference where William Hay did the rolling back the frontiers speech, and I still came to the following one and have been ever since. And Young Conservatives in those days, just as Young Labour and Young Liberals, were much bigger youth participation organisations, and I think it's a real sadness that we don't have that strength of numbers these days, because it really gave us the confidence to go out and challenge our local communities. Knock on the door of the town hall, go and see councillors and say, look, we're not happy about this, we need a better deal for young people. And that's what government is trying to do, what I've been trying to do and what Nick's trying to do through Positive for Youth and the things we've been coming up with, is to give young people the confidence to say, I want to have my say in my local community, and I want the people in the town halls and positions of power to listen. Young people are 20% of the population and 100% of this country's future. It's a cliche, but it's absolutely true, and you have every right to have your say. What we have got to do is to narrow the achievement gap in schools. It is a terrible indictment of the lack of social mobility that's come about in the last few years. That last year only 78 children who qualified for free school meals went to Oxbridge. Okay, that's just one measure. There are 80,000 potential young people qualifying for free school meals, doing A-levels. Only 78 made it to Oxbridge. That is not good enough. Now that's why what we've been doing, what we need to do more of, is through the pupil premium, through making sure that the extra support goes into those young people from more deprived backgrounds, kids in care as well. They get that extra support early in school, so we have a level playing field and they can compete with those other kids from middle class backgrounds and those who are privileged enough to go to public schools as well. And private schools are not just about getting better qualifications. What they do well is all the extracurricular activity as well, whether it's around cadet services, Duke of Edinburgh staff. This is the sort of thing that makes you a more rounded individual, it gives you life skills, and it gives you confidence. And we need all those sorts of things happening in the maintained sector through academies and through other schools that the vast majority of our kids in this country go to.
Okay, well let's go to a vote on this one then. We have 4 options which should be coming up on the board behind you, hopefully. Yay. So you have number 1, early intervention to ensure better education throughout school, which is one of the things Tim picked up on. Increased widening access projects at universities, which Nick was talking about. Job guarantee or training schemes for young people out of education or work for a set period. And workplace culture, improving workplace culture to allow for increased and fairer progression rates. I'm afraid you can't have all of them. You have to choose one of 1 to 4. Off the scale for early intervention at school. And you're not quite so interested in workplace culture as you are in anything else.